Hey, in this one I'm going to show you a neat little trick you can use if you don't want to reload everything that you already fetched one time if the same user come back to your application. So you have something in your browser that's called local storage. You can find it in your console under application, and you see here we have the local storage for our local host that we're running now. In local storage you can store data and retrieve it back to your application. It's limited to just storing strings, but we can fix that by converting our state object to a string first and then convert it back to an object when we grab the data for our application. Let's go into our home component, our home.js file. Where and when do we store the data in the local storage? As we did before, we can do a callback function in our set state when we have grabbed the data from the API. So if we go into this row here, after the curly brace, write a comma, and we create a new arrow function like this, curly braces, and we have a callback function that'll run when the set state have made all the updates to the state. So in that way, we'll make sure that the state is updated before we save it to the local storage. We just write local storage dot set item parentheses, and we can call this whatever we want. And this is the state for the home page, so we can call it home state like this. Then we write a comma, and we have to convert our state that's an object now into a string. We do that with JSON dot string file, and we just send in the state, this dot state, like so. This will make sure we store the data in local storage whenever we retrieve something. We can test this now. We save it and we go back to our application. And you can already see as the application reloaded as we saved, we already have a state in the local storage. So how do we retrieve this one? Well, we can check if we have a state saved in local storage before we retrieve something in component did mount. And we do that with an if statement. So we write if local storage get item, and we named it home state. And then we do something. Else, we just retrieving the data from the API just as before, like so. How do we retrieve the data from the local storage? It's pretty easy actually. We create a new const called state, and we write JSON parse local storage dot get item home state, like this. And this will take the string from the local storage and convert it back to a state object. So now we have a new object here, and we can just set our state with that one. We write this dot set state, and we use the spread operator here also, dot 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 state, like so. We save it and go back to our application. We can test if it works. So we can load more. And if we go into a movie, then we go back. It should show us all the movies, and it does. So we can load more and load more. And if we reload the application, you can see we're showing all the movies that we already fetched from the API, so we don't have to fetch them again. Pretty neat, huh? We can test it on the search. Like this. And we select the movie, and we go back. And the search result will still be there. If you don't want to store the search result, you can just make an if statement in your fetch items method. So we can check that one here. If this state search term equals to empty string, we're not doing a search. So we can just wrap it in this like so, and it won't save to local storage when we're doing a search. We can go back into our movie component and do the same thing. So in our fetch items method, we go to our last set state and create a new arrow function, a new callback function. We write local storage dot set item, and for this one we want to grab the movie ID, so we create a template literal with a backtick, and we grab it from this dot props dot match dot params dot movie ID, and another backtick. We write a comma, and then we do the JSON stringify with our state, this dot state. And this will make sure we save it in local storage. Then we can also, just as before, check in our component did mount if we have a local storage. Otherwise, we'll fetch the data from the API. So we create a new if statement, if local storage dot get item, and then we do this template literal again with a backtick. This dot props dot match dot params dot movie ID, and another backtick, like so. Then in our else statement, we're just doing the same as before. We're grabbing the API data, and up here we create a const of state JSON parse local storage dot get item parenthesis backtick dollar curly braces this dot props dot match dot params dot movie ID, like so. And then we set our state just as before, set state. We use the spread operator yet again, dot 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 state. You could of course save this one in a local variable or something, because it's really long to write. It would probably be easier to have it in a local variable somewhere. Well, we go back to our app. We go into movie here. And as you can see, it saves to the local storage. And it will add all the movies that we visit. So I think that's about it about the local storage. It's really useful, so we don't have to make unnecessary API calls if we don't need to. In the next video, we're going to deploy our app.